Welcome to episode 441 of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I interview Dr. Gabriele Gallo. Gabriele is a sports scientist whose research interests lie in investigating various aspects of cycling performance, and he is also the man behind Knowledgeiswatt, which some of you may already be familiar with as an Instagram account which summarizes research into bite-sized infographics. In this episode, we will talk about Gabriele's own research, especially about the training of GC contenders in Grand Tours. But we will also talk more generally about the role of sports science for athletes and coaches and how to use it effectively and some pitfalls to avoid as well. But before we get into the interview, big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Fuel and Hydration. They create carbohydrate and electrolyte products that are effective, practical, and tasty. And to me, the number one thing that any sport nutrition product needs to have is that it should not cause flavor fatigue, even in very long races. Because if you have to reduce your carb intake compared to your plan, then that could be the difference between a PB and walking the last 10 kilometers of the run in Ironman, for example. So the product you use needs to still be appealing enough for you to keep fueling at the end of an Ironman. And this is, to me, one of the biggest advantages of Precision Fuel Hydration's carbohydrate products. The flavor is neutral, mildly sweet, making it, in my opinion, very easy to consume in as much as you want, really, for hours on end. So you can really stick to your plan throughout the race. As a That Triathlon Show listener, you can get 15% off your first order by using the code TTS24 on precisionfuelhydration.com. And thank you to Zen8. The Zen8 indoor swim trainer is a dryland swim bench that allows you to improve your technique, power, and swim training consistency. For a lot of athletes, the limitation to swim training is the time commitment, especially for those living further away from a pool. If you need a 2 to 2.5 hour time window, for example, to be able to get a 60-minute swim done, then it can make it very difficult to swim more than once or twice per week, as finding such a time window in a busy schedule is quite a challenge for most of us. If you're in this situation where you're restricted on how many times you can swim per week, then you can use the Zen8 to complement your pool swimming with quick and efficient home-based workouts that challenge the swim-specific muscles, including core strength and stability as well, and give yourself a chance to keep improving your swimming even when you have limited time in the water. You can try to Zen8 risk-free for 30 days and get 20% off your first order on zen8swimtrainer.com/TTS. Now, without any further ado, here's the interview with Dr. Gabriele Gallo. Welcome to That Triathlon Show, Gabriele. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Mikael, and thank you for inviting me. And everything's great here.
Good to hear, good to hear. So let's start with an introduction. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I just finished from, I think, 2 or 3 months, my PhD in exercise and sport science. That was with the University of Genoa. I did my last year in Auckland, New Zealand. So it was the last year of my PhD. So my background is everything about exercise and sport science with focus on endurance sports and in particular road cycling. And so this is my academic background. And in parallel, I'm a coach, so I'm coaching cyclists. And from, I think it is 2 years, since 2 years, I'm also, let's say, divulgate scientific information through social media and the web, through my platform and social media accounts. The name is Knowledgeiswatt. So this is my background.
Yeah, and I'm sure that through that platform, quite a few listeners are already familiar with you, even though they may not know that the name, the man behind the platform. But yeah, that is a really good resource for sure, and we'll get back to that in a little bit later in this interview. But before that, can you give us a bit more of an overview of the research topics that you have been involved in throughout your PhD?
Yeah, so as I told before, my main focus is road cycling and endurance sports. So during my PhD, basically, I tried to describe and to understand the physiological determinants of road cycling in different age categories. So the U19, U23, and then the professional one, as well as trying to describe and understand training strategies of successful world-class road cyclists, like a cyclist who finished in the top 5 or top 3 in Giro d'Italia and Tour de France. And in addition, especially during my last year in Auckland, I tried to dig a little bit more into exercise physiology, so poor exercise physiology, and with the reference to durability. So trying to understand as much as possible the physiological determinants of durability, so about fatigue resistance during prolonged exercise.
Yeah, and two of those topics we have already in the previous episodes discussed, so I'll link to that in the show notes. We had Ed Maunder, who you probably know from Auckland.
Yeah, he was my supervisor in New Zealand.
Yeah, I assume so. So he was on to talk about durability, and we had Peter Leo, who I know that you have collaborated on some research with the age categories and the requirements for success in different age categories. We talked about that with him. But the one topic that I want to dig a little bit deeper into is the one you mentioned there with the case studies into the top finishers in Giro d'Italia and Tour de France. So basically these were observational case studies into how these top GC riders train. Can you explain a bit more the research that you did and the findings?
Yeah, exactly. It was they were just case studies, so just observations, retrospective observations or of training data. So basically, my idea was that there were a lot of scientific studies published about training characteristics of road cyclists, but they were just about annual data. So you know that you can get the same annual training load, same annual training intensity, and same annual training volume with different week by week and day by day management of load and recovery and all these kind of training characteristics. So we just took the data of Giro d'Italia and Tour de France finishers who finished in the top 5, and we analyzed this data week by week in 2 studies, and then in another one day by day. So we just look at what they did to reach then their position in the final GC. So all the preparation in the months before the Grand Tour. And so this was the study design.
And what was the length of the preparation period that you investigated?
All the preparation, so all the season. So for Giro d'Italia, between end of November, beginning of December until May, while for the Tour de France, same beginning, so it was about December until July.
Mm. And what years did you look at? This was something that I was curious about. Which years did these athletes finish in the top 5 or top 3 in the Grand Tours?
Yeah, the year was different between different cyclists. So let's say that, for example, in one study, there were 3 cyclists and the years were different between different cyclists, but the time frame was between, let's say broadly, 2015 and 2020.
Yeah.
Like this.
I just think that that's an important thing for the listeners to hear, because so that nobody assumes that we're talking about this year's top 5, because there's always, of course, a delay. I mean, these studies, some of them are already a couple of years since you published, and then there's a lot of delay in the academic process anyway. So
I think the latest season was 2021. But the other one were, for example, 2015, 2017, 2018. So as you said, before publishing data, it's better to have a little bit of time, and they are not so, let's say, hot data to publish, so it's easier.
Yeah. And so what were, in terms of then the findings or the patterns, could you see any patterns or anything? What were the interesting takeaways from these case studies?
Yeah. So of course, there were differences between different athletes in the preparation, but we try to see something like common patterns between different athletes. And the first one that is widely recognized as one of the features of successful endurance athletes was the high volume at low intensity that was performed by each cyclist. So let's say we define the low intensity as below 85% of FTP. So because this was an approximation of the first threshold, so below the first threshold, let's say, and the time spent at this intensity during training was between 80 and 90% of the total time. So was huge compared to the other two intensities that were medium between the two thresholds and high intensity above the second threshold. So high volume of low intensity was the main feature that was common for every cyclist. And then also, as I said before, looking at week by week and day by day data, you can look also at periodization patterns compared to having only annual data. So from periodization point of view, the main feature is a sort of, we called it races-based block periodization. So basically, before the Grand Tour, the Gold Grand Tour, so Giro or Tour, there were some, let's say, preparation races that were 1 week races. And when we compare the load of these 1 week races to the rest of the preparation, they represent a sort of high load and high intensity block. So when cyclists perform these 1 week races, there was a huge increase in high intensity volume. So let's say basically it's race, so it's quite obvious, but for me it's interesting to see that the increase in intensity compared to just training weeks was huge, something like 30% more. So a lot more of high intensity during races. And the second one was that the second periodization pattern was that during no races weeks, so during just training weeks, there was, let's say, the classic linear periodization pattern. So they before they built volume, so low intensity volume, and then intensity progressively increased through the weeks. So it is something like the already widely used on the field by a lot of athletes model of linear periodization. So progressively increase the intensity through the weeks until the goal race. So these were the week by week periodization patterns. And in the third study, the last one, we looked at the day by day periodization pattern. So how to manage, let's say, the microcycle and not the mesocycles and the macrocycle. And what we saw is, again, quite obvious. There was alternation between load and recovery. But for me, it was very interesting to see that differently from other sports like running or swimming or rowing, high intensity and high volume were combined within the same training sessions. So let's say that the hard days were, for example, 4 hours with a lot of high intensity work, and there were almost no something like 1 hour training sessions with high intensity. So they combine high volume and high intensity between the same training sessions. So this is the overview.
Yeah, and that point speaks to the specificity of how cycling is different from running and swimming, right? Yeah. That you have to be able to do high intensity within at the end of a 4 hour or 5 hour stage. So I think that makes sense, and that's a good overview. A couple of other things that I wanted to ask about that I know you mentioned in the study with the week by week periodization, week by week analysis about altitude. I think altitude was something that quite a few of them incorporated, but not necessarily everybody. Can you speak to how altitude was used?
Yeah, as you said, it was quite different between different cyclists. So let's say that 75% of the cyclists analyzed performed altitude training. So it was something like the classic altitude training. So 2-3 times during the whole preparation, 2-3 weeks each training camp. And the altitude was, let's say on average, 2,000 meters above sea level. But there were also some South Americans, so altitude natives that performed altitude training even higher. So it was higher than 2,500 meters above sea level. So almost near to 3,000. And I think this is very interesting to know and to see. And other cyclists did not perform any altitude training camp at all. So there was a lot of variation in this strategy.
Mm. And in the day-by-day analysis, did you see, was there a clear pattern of, for example, you see quite often people use 3 days hard or high volume and then 1 day recovery, so a 3-1 pattern or a 3-1-2-1 pattern. Was that something that you could see, or was it a bit more variable and not something that you could clearly distinguish a very specific pattern like that?
Yeah, good question. Because I tried to see in the data this kind of patterns. So let's say that during the first phase of the preparation, when the intensity was not so high, it was difficult to see a pattern. So there were not quite clear pattern like 2 days hard and 1 day recovery, or 3 days hard and 1 recovery repeated over time. But then in the second part, when the intensity was higher, so following the classic linear periodization, some kind of pattern was observed. And usually it was 2 days hard and then 1 day recovery, or 2 days recovery and then again 2 days hard. It was very... I can't remember one time that there were 3 days hard or 4 days hard. So the pattern was 2 days hard and 1 or 2 days recovery and then repeat when the preparation was more specific in the second part with higher intensity.
Yeah. And with the race blocks that you talked about, how many race days did they have before the Giro or before the Tour? How, I guess I know that varied quite a bit, but can you talk a little bit about how different cyclists used racing? Were there some that used just 1 or 2 1-week stage races and others used a lot more racing? What did that look like?
Yeah. Also here, a lot of variation between different cyclists in their approach, but we can say on average 2 or 3 1-week stage races were performed before Giro or Tour. And to reconnect with your last question, while in training weeks, for example, there were only 2 consecutive days hard, the 1-week stage races were all consecutive hard days from high intensity point of view. So when they performed these 1-week stage races, there were 5 or 7 or 8 consecutive, let's say, hard days, defining hard days as days in which both the total load and the time spent at high intensity were both high.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a good overview of the periodization. Do you have anything else that we should talk about with regard to these studies, or do you think that covers it as at an overview level?
I think that's all, and I found interesting to see this kind of races block periodization, because there are studies, training studies, so controlled training studies that showed some benefit of block periodization, or whatever the name is. We can call them crash microcycle that could benefit performance. So I found that maybe this kind of planning the calendar is something like obtaining the same benefit that we saw in controlled training studies of block periodization. So I found this similarity between the block periodization of training studies and the 1-week stage races observed in these case studies on successful world cyclists.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And of course, I think that there are other benefits as well in that you do the intensity in a specific way, the way that it happens in racing, but also maybe that you are more motivated to go really hard when it's race day, so you can actually get more out of yourself for those hard days, for those bursts of high intensity when you're actually doing it in an important race. And especially when you're a professional cyclist and racing is what you get paid to do, then you're going to have a pretty easy time to motivate yourself to try to try to be the first one to the top.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I agree 100%. For sure, also psychological factors can play a role in this calendar, in this method of planning the calendar and the races before the goal.
Yeah. So let's move on to a different topics. So I want to ask a bit more and discuss Knowledgeiswatt. So the platform that you mentioned, I think you started with the Instagram account with doing infographics where you summarize research studies in a bite-sized content for people to consume. But you also now have a Substack newsletter where it's more of a medium form article, so medium length that is. And I guess why did you decide to start this project, and what are the objectives with it?
Yeah, so as I said in the introduction, it was about 2 years ago, and I just published some scientific papers on scientific journals. So my first papers, and then it was something like nothing happened. So you put a lot of work. You publish scientific studies, but then I realized that I was reaching few people. So we know that the language and the structure of scientific papers is very, let's say, difficult to understand and to interpret for people that are not into scientific research. So I felt that something was missing, and I saw that in other areas like strength and conditioning and nutrition, some people was doing something similar. So trying to use another method to divulgate complex scientific information to, let's say, to a wide public, that to everyone. So to make scientific research understandable to everyone. So this is how Knowledgeiswatt was born. So I just created the infographics, and I put them on Instagram and X or Twitter or whatever the name. And at the beginning was something like so and so. So some people was liking it and other not. But I just continued to put out infographics because also I was learning through the process, because also you organize also information that you can use in your own research. And then the social media progressively grow. And so it was 3 months or 4 months ago that I saw that on social media, all the people were asking for more information. So they just saw the infographic on social media, but they wanted to know more. So I decided to create a sort of newsletter and the platform on Substack that basically comment and make a review of each study, but it is something like more in depth compared to the infographics that is just 10-second or 20-second reading, while the review on Substack are a little bit more, something like 3 or 4 minutes, but still staying easy and keeping all the reading understandable to everyone. So self-coached athletes, coaches, and all the people that is not into scientific research.
Yeah, because I think when you read an infographic, you can kind of easily see what was done in the study, what was found, but you don't know anything about the context, and also you don't know anything about how to apply it. But then when you go to an article where you can discuss it in like a non-scientific language, in a more approachable, easy to understand way, then you can also discuss those sorts of more nuanced things, but like context and application. What does it mean? how can you potentially apply something like that in training. So I think that that's a very logical and a natural progression. So with that said, I want to ask you if you can you provide something like a user guide to how would you recommend people consume your content? And if we start with just the infographics, because that's the easiest and shortest and fastest way for people to consume, but how should people think when they read something like the infographics that you produce?
Yeah, so my advice is, first of all, is a ongoing process. So I'm improving social media and the Substack platform, but at the moment it's something like just have a look at the social media infographics, read it, and if you find the infographic that could be interesting for you or for athletes, and you want to know something more, just go on the Substack platform and look if I already published on the platform the full review of the study, so you can read everything about it, and also with my own interpretation of data. So you can have a look at the data, make your own idea, then read my comment on the data and put together. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you can stick with your own idea, or maybe you have the same idea as me looking at the data, but just my advice is just look at what was done and make your own idea looking at the graph and at the data. And then you can read the comment of the study, but you can also stick with your own idea without agreeing with my interpretation. So I think that this is important, because sometimes research is too much interpreted by people that are divulgating it without the possibility to have a look at the, let's say, raw data or raw graph and these kind of things. So I will say that this is my point of view today. But as I said, it's an ongoing process, and maybe I will change the structure or something more. I'm working on something like created a sort of collection of infographics divided by topic, and then you can click on the infographic and go to the review of the study, the full review of the study. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I think that something kind of related to what you already said, one follow-up point from my side would also be that sometimes people think that research papers provide an answer, but they really don't. They just provide an experiment that was done and something was found, but then how you actually apply that in training, what it means in training, is not necessarily a yes or no, that okay, this is good, this is bad. This still is something that everybody needs to find out in their own context, and it can give you some ideas for this might be an interesting training intervention to try. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but you can never say that just because a certain interval protocol is very, very good in a study, it doesn't mean that everybody should do it and that it works for every situation, because there are so many different contexts that you need to take into account. And even if the context is perfect for you, not everybody responds the same way. So at the end of the day, it's what works for you, but using research as kind of a way to get ideas and a way to basically ask questions rather than get answers is, I think, the best way to look at it.
Yeah. I agree 100%. And I think that the misunderstanding about research in sports science comes from two opposite point of view. So the first one is something like they want to copy and paste the protocol of sports science studies on their own situation. But of course, every research protocol, every training study protocol try to fix some variable to observe the effect of others. So for some point of view, it doesn't make sense to copy and paste the exact protocol used in each study. So this is the first misunderstanding. The other point of view, the other opposite, is just, okay, all the sports science studies are unuseful because every athlete is unique and you have to apply on your own situation. So they are just not useful. And I think the truth is in the middle, because of course each athlete is different. But as you said before, just read the study or read the infographic or the review, then look at the data and understand the principle, not the exact outcome in numbers of the study. Try to understand the principle that you can get from the study, and then you can have an idea to how you can apply this principle of your own situation or your athlete's situation. So this is my idea.
And that leads nicely to my next question, because you talked about controlling variables, and I wanted to ask about there are certain situations when you do an intervention study, a control trial, you have two groups that do maybe a control group and you have an intervention group. You try to control everything, maybe the diet and the time of day and all these things. You do the same thing. You don't do any other training than the intervention training, maybe in certain cases. So everything is controlled for, but then it's not very much like what the real world looks like. But then on the other hand, you have things like the case studies we discussed at the start of the episode, where you look in retrospect at what athletes that were successful actually did. So you didn't control for anything, but you're just observing and trying to synthesize what you can see in a scientific way by standard observational study methods. So I guess, can you discuss the trade-off between these two, and what are your thoughts on when you as a coach, for example, look at how useful different studies are? Do you have a preference for the more controlled intervention studies or the observational studies, or is it really a mix of both and just understanding the limitations and benefits of each?
Yeah, I think that the last option that you just said is the best. So just understanding how research is performed in sports science, and understand the limitation of each study design. So let's say, for example, case studies on successful athletes, like my studies on Giro d'Italia and Tour de France top 5 and top 3 finishers. Of course, they are useful because they show patterns that successful athletes used. But case studies, because they are just an observation, cannot say that this is the best solution to use to win. They are just an observation. So let's say there is a good probability that what successful athletes do is good to apply also for other kind of athletes, of similar athletes, but we cannot say that is the best solution. So this is the limit of case studies. So, but on the other hand, they are very interesting because they are a unique insight about very important data of successful cyclists. And then there are, as you said before, controlled trials that standardize the setting and other variable to observe a specific outcome. So let's say, for example, to stick all training variables except one that can be, I don't know, whatever the time spent in one specific training zone, to see that specific outcome. But in real life, maybe the other variables are not fixed in the way of the study. So this is a limit, but this is the only, let's say, the only way to see an effect of manipulating a specific one specific variable. So is as you said, my advice is just to read all the kind of research, understanding the pro and cons of each research design, and then try to get some principle that you can apply to your own training without copying and paste.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you think that, I mean, there are some training methods and best practices, let's say, in terms of how things are actually, how people train, how coaches construct things, that are not that we don't have good evidence for in the research, in the literature. For example, I'm thinking about, for example, low cadence training. There's not a lot of good evidence for that, but it seems that a lot of good cyclists and triathletes are using it quite a lot. So do you think that what is your take on that balance between the art of coaching, where people use something and kind of observe that it seems to be working and that it works for others, and you try to see if it works for you or for your athlete. How to use that and how to get that right, but on the other hand, still looking at, well, does this actually make sense? Do we have strong evidence that it's not good? What is your take on that?
This is a very hot topic because, as you said before, for example, low cadence or whatever the name torque training is something that more than one study show that is not so, let's say, it's not more effective than free cadence training. So we have this kind of evidence from literature, but a lot of people are using it. As you said, I think it's trying to find the balance. And also, I will also weight the number of studies on the topic. So let's say that you are doing a training method or a training strategy, and one study or two studies come out and say that this is not so useful. If you are using it with success and your athlete is saying that is good for him or for her, I will wait to say that this is not useful and we have just to bin it and not using it anymore. On the other hand, if there are a lot of studies on different kind of athletes with different research design that show that one training method is not so good, even if the athlete feedback is good, I will try to understand more before continuing to do it. So, for example, I myself, I was prescribing low cadence and torque training, okay, and then I understood all the research behind low cadence and torque training, and it's not that I'm not using it anymore at all, but I just started to use it less. So I think even in this area is finding the balance, the key.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Do you think there are certain areas where it's easier, or maybe there is a more direct link between being, let's call it, research led? You can take something directly from the research and implement it into training. To give you an example, for me, I found that things like heat adaptation protocols and so on, I think that there's it's pretty easy to take a protocol and use it, and it's quite clear cut in actually applying something like that to training, but something completely different. Let's say the overall training volume. Okay, we know that on average, maybe a certain level of athlete trains this number of hours per year, but still there is a huge variation there. So that's a very difficult thing that for me, it doesn't make sense to be research led at all. There you have to kind of be more on the art side and look at the athlete as a complete unique individual. But do you have some examples of areas where you think it makes sense to look quite, where you can link the research quite directly into application, and maybe other areas where you think that it's quite difficult to do that?
Yeah, I think as you said, I think it is all about the context. So I think that where you can take the research protocol without if the research protocol that could be effective to enhance performance is influenced by the minimum number of other variables that you can touch. So it's easier and more straightforward to apply directly it, like it training. You can just, let's say, add it to your traditional training, and so it's more straightforward. And I think that everything that is about, let's say, tech or also garments, for example, pre-cooling jackets, I think it's pretty easy. Yep. You can just look at the temperature that they start to work to increase performance, and then if the temperature is above that, let's say 30 degrees, then you can use the pre-cooling jacket. So they are easier to implement, more straightforward, because you can just look at very similar study to the real world situation. But for example, as you said, manipulating one training variable is different if you change this variable on let's say 8 hours per week amateur cyclist or on 25 hours per week professional athlete. So in training is a little bit more difficult, but I think in some way you can still get a principle and trying to apply it on different athletes.
Yeah, absolutely. This is more of a hypothetical, interesting question, but if you could wish for 3 different topics or research questions that you or you, your group, or other groups could start investigating with an unlimited budget, unlimited resources, so you can have everything you need, which research questions or topics would you then want to investigate?
This is a fun game. Yeah. I think that I was speaking, I think, with one colleague of mine some weeks ago, and I think that is something like have one only variable that you can measure, and you know that variable is leading to training adaptations, so to an increase in performance. Because, for example, we know that there is some molecules at cell level, at muscle cells level. For example, PGC1 alpha is one of them. That we know that this kind of molecules stimulate training adaptations, physiological training adaptations. So if we have an easy way to sample this kind of molecules many times for many days, for many weeks, so to understand maybe also in real time what is happening to the body, if the body is adapting or not, because just measuring as a training outcome the physiological thresholds and performance is not the best, because you cannot take a test every day to understand what is happening in your body. So I think having just one measure of training adaptation that you can sample without any effort every day at every hour.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool one. Do you have any other wishes that would be interesting to do or investigate?
There's here I don't really know, because usually in research we have the opposite situation. So just try to stick with less budget as possible. So it's a difficult scenario to imagine, but I think this is the biggest one about training adaptations. And I think the other one is having something like a measure of muscle glycogen or carbs availability in real time during exercise. So you know how many carbs you have in your body available to be used to produce energy. Better if it is muscle glycogen. Better if you can you can have the difference between different muscle fibers, and to have it in real time, and to see if it is linked or not to durability or fatigue resistance during prolonged exercise. So 4 hours races, 5 hours races could be another very good opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. And if you can look into the future a little bit, what do you think sports science will look like in, let's say, 10 years time, or specifically, what do you think that there are some things that will change in how research is done, or how sports science is used by coaches and other practitioners? Do you think that there are any changes that will happen within the next, let's say, 10 years or so?
Another funny question, Ed. I don't really know. I think my try is Knowledgeiswatt is trying to improve the community, let's say. So I think that more and more people will have access to complex informations that some years ago were restricted to academics and scientific researchers or very high level coaches that read scientific journals. So this is the first one. The second one, I think we all know that AI is widely spread in every field. So I think that they will be more and more important also in sports science. And I think that more and more research will try to predict performance and training adaptations through AI. I don't know if it is the right pattern to understand more about the human body and endurance sports, but I see this kind of pattern. So just trying to predict with AI measures that usually can be measured in the lab. So let's say all that you can measure with a gas expire test or with a biopsy or whatever, or trying to predict it in real time or not in real time, but with wearable devices that are already on the market. So I don't know if it is clear, but
yeah, I think the first point you made with the information availability, I think we're already there. To be honest, I think everybody now, through platforms like yours and podcasts and various outlets, there is huge access to information, and I think that's why I've been asking you a lot of these questions about how to actually use the information, because I think that that's probably the biggest problem that we have today is not access to information, but it's how do we actually use it, and especially because information can be positive or neutral or even negative if we don't understand it correctly or we don't use it correctly.
Yeah. I think this is a good point, because also this is why I created Knowledgeiswatt. That I was meaning high quality and true information and not just information, because as you said, the web at the moment is something like a jungle of information. There are many blogs of coaches, mainly, I think, and many of them, not all of course, but many of them, they just let's say divulgate informations from other blogs. So blog divulgate information from other blogs, and the chain is very long. And so already at the third divulgation, the third person that divulgate the information didn't read the original information, so the scientific research, and just take the click and bait, I think is the English term.
Clickbait.
They just take the click and bait words or information, but without sharing the raw data, so the graph with the data and what was already done, but just say something like do this and you will improve this by 10%. So I think just trying to limit as much as possible this kind of divulgation while sticking with the original research is the way to improve the community.
Yeah, I have a great example from yesterday or 2 days ago, actually, where within our the WhatsApp group we have for all of the athletes that are coached by one of our coaches, there was a link to, somebody posted a link to an Instagram post where there was a person that basically did a little bit of a comedy sketch about how all age group triathletes are doping, or a lot of them are doping. And he was referencing a study which showed that, or said that 11% of age group triathletes are, so amateur triathletes are doping. But then, and this is something that I have actually seen before. I saw it in a forum post some months ago, I think. But then the actual study, which to be fair, I haven't read the entire study, but I just went and skimmed it a little bit, and you see that they used a questionnaire that included things like caffeine and apparently also just some normal medications as doping that are not actually categorized as doping by WADA. So it's an example of how information spreads, and now there is maybe this perception that more than 10% of amateur triathletes are doping when this was just an example of a pretty badly conducted study, or at least with some serious limitations to it. So I completely agree with that the quality information is still something that there should be more of, and that's something also that I guess is important for everybody to learn to to differentiate between quality information and not quality information.
Yeah. The other thing that I saw many times is many blogs, it's something like, as I said before, for example, that torque training improves efficiency, while all the studies published show the opposite. So, yeah, I think it is about quality and, yeah. But I may be biased about Knowledgeiswatt, but I was saying again that this kind of, this way, so just showing the data, and you can agree or not reading my comment, is a good way to proceed to improve the community.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think it's very good quality. So let's move on to, I have a few more questions, some general, personal, reflective questions. So the next one is, what is something that you're trying to learn more about or focus on at the moment? And this can be in your academically, but it could also be more coaching wise or personally.
Yeah. Again, it's about what I just said. So not trying to improve, but just sticking with the process to divulgate information in a very good way, and just building it up to more and more studies, so that the community can grow. And so just but just keeping the process to divulgate information, to find good ways to do it and to make it understand to all the people and reach as much as people as possible. Because the other thing is that we all know, English is the most common language on the world, but there are a lot of people that are into endurance sports with this, that don't speak English. So I'm trying also to extend to other languages. So finding people to do it, to translate all this content in Spanish. I'm already doing it in Italian, and but also I think Spanish, French, Portuguese, and all these kind of languages.
Oh, that's really cool. That maybe that's that can give you some inspiration for the answer to the next question, because that is, if you could magically give yourself great skill or knowledge in one specific area, what would you choose? Maybe you would choose Mandarin Chinese.
all the languages in the world.
Yeah.
Another funny question. I'm not prepared, but I don't know really. I'm just sticking with my process and trying to replicate it. So it's a funny question, but I never thought about it. So
that's all right. That's right. You can pass on that one. And what is the best or most influential book that you have read?
This is interesting, but in endurance sports or whatever. Or
it can be whatever. It can be whatever.
Because I read a lot about, let's say, personal growth and these kind of things. And my two preferred authors are Napoleon Hill. So I think Think and Grow Rich is the most famous, but also I found interesting Outwitting the Devil of Napoleon Hill. And also Tony Robbins, that is same area, so personal growth. Weekend the Giant Within is another good reading.
And what about, do you have something within endurance sports or within sports that you have found influential?
Yeah, I think that at the moment, the most comprehensive book about endurance sports is from Inigo Mujica. So I think is I can't remember the name.
Endurance training, science and practice. I think.
Yeah. It's something like a classic name of the book, but just the book by Inigo Mujica is the most comprehensive book about endurance science. And in the future, maybe I will like to something like put all the content of Knowledgeiswatt together and to put out a book. But maybe in the future could be another very good thing.
Yeah. And to finish off, can you give 3 tips to amateur endurance athletes that want to improve their performance?
This is another funny question. And first of all, maybe it is not intuitive compared to what we said during the podcast, but just don't try to overcomplicate things trying to use all the science in the web and all the science that you can. But first of all, stick with good basis and with your health and all the basic principle like progressive overload, like staying healthy outside sports, so like drinking, like sleeping, like eating. So just stick with the basic at the beginning is the first more important advice, because there are a lot of amateur athletes that try to skip the basics and directly go to the latest 1% gain from scientific studies. So this is the first one. Second one is try to make space to increase your volume. So I know that is not straightforward with a 9-5 job, but at least in the weekend, the first variable that is important for cycling, especially because you don't impact with joints and so you are less prone to injury, is to do a lot of high volume at low intensity. So try to increase as much as possible if you have, of course, time. So this is the second one. And the third one is just the opposite of the first. So try to understand more, reading something about science. And of course, you don't have to apply whole that you read, but you can find that 1 or 2 or 3 tips that are logistic doable for you to apply it in an easy way. And you can gain something like 1 or 5 or 10% gain in your performance. So just read a lot and then try to understand that 2 or 3 things that can help you from scientific studies.
Yeah. And sometimes that reading those studies is not even about finding the things that you can apply, but finding the things that you should not apply, finding things that don't work, because in some cases those things have also been studied, and you can see that, well, maybe this is something that makes less sense. So that's a good point.
Yeah, of course. For one example is, we said before, is torque training against gym strength training. So I think that the second one is more effective. So this is one good example. So you can read, you can find that overdoing torque training maybe is not so effective to improve performance, and you can decide to put less effort in it. So yeah, as you said.
Yeah. And I mean, we should be clear also that you said that you're not using torque training as much, but you're still using it. I'm the same. I still use it with some athletes. Yeah. I like to try it and see if the athlete seems to respond well to it, and based on how the training is developing. So we're not, just because we have used this example, it doesn't mean that we're saying that nobody should do it, because
it's important to say it. Because there is also variability, and I do the same. I try, if the athletes also believe in it, and the athlete is responding well with feelings and with progress through the weeks. Still, in few situations, I still use it. So yeah.
Great. And finally, well, tell the listeners again, where can they find you? Knowledgeiswatt. Give the directions to follow your work, please.
Yeah. So you can just find me on social media. So mainly on Instagram, where there is the majority of the content, but also on X or Twitter. And then from the social media, you can find in the biography the link to the Substack platform, because on social media you have only the infographics, while on Substack you can find the full review of the study described in the infographics. So infographics and social media are free at the moment, while on Substack there is a small fee, something like €5 per month or €6 per month, depending on the type of subscription. And there you can find a full review of the study.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gabriele. It was great to chat to you, and hope to do it again another time.
Yeah, thanks, Mikael. And see you next time.
I hope that you enjoyed that interview. As always, you can find the show notes on scientifictriathlon.com, and we will have links to the various papers we discussed in the beginning of the interview regarding the periodization and training strategies of Giro d'Italia and Tour de France general classification podium finishers and top 5 finishers. I'll also link, of course, to the Knowledgeiswatt account on Instagram and the newsletter on Substack. and to Gabriele's ResearchGate page where you can find all of his research. To me, I think that the biggest takeaways from this episode apply to how to consume and then use information coming from research from sports science. And the first point here that I want to highlight is that if you're reading the actual research studies, then the importance of understanding the advantages and disadvantages, also limitations of the various different study methods and methodologies. So for example, if you compare randomized controlled trials, they have certain strengths and certain limitations versus case studies and observational studies that have different strengths and different limitations. So it's not about one being better than the other, but understanding how they differ in terms of the advantages and the limitations and what that means for how you can apply it to your situation. And then the second point is that if you don't actually go directly to the source, you don't read the research papers themselves, but you consume this information through other sources, for example, on social media, then being very deliberate about which sources of information you use when consuming this type of information indirectly. And Knowledgeiswatt is certainly a great source that I would recommend if you want to get a good understanding, a good summary of various studies without actually reading the original research papers. Now, let me take just a quick minute to promote what we do at Scientific Triathlon, especially if you're new here and you don't really know. We provide coaching, consultations, and training plans, both ready-made and customized, and we also have training camps. You can find out detailed information about all of these products and services on scientifictriathlon.com. But today I just want to read out an email that I received a few days ago from an athlete named Dustin, who was using the intermediate half distance training plan. And Dustin writes, I finally did my 713 this past Sunday. I cannot thank you enough. Would it be my first 713 distance and being 230 pounds? My hope was to be around 6 hours. I crushed my expectations with a time of 5:32. Not only that, I'm already back at training and feel great. I wasn't even feeling the bike leg until mile 45. Having a structured race plan to stick to was life-saving, and those long Saturday bikes with brick runs followed by Sunday long runs really set me up for success. I passed people sitting on road curbs who looked much fitter and stronger than me because I had my nutrition and my race speeds dialed in, and they apparently had not. This was an amazing plan to follow. I cannot wait to either use this plan again next year or bump up the volume and go with your advanced plan. So, congratulations, Dustin. That's an amazing race, an amazing first debut at the half distance, or 7.3 distance triathlon. And this is just one example of many very happy training plan users that we have. I always recommend coaching if it's something that works within your budget, because it is the best way to improve as much as you possibly can and learn as much as you possibly can. But I am a big pragmatist, and I know that for a lot of people, it's just not something that they can or want to spend that much money on, because it is a hobby for most of us. And in these cases, a ready-made training plan can still give you really great results, as in this example with Dustin. And again, to learn more about our training plans or our coaching and other products and services, just go to scientifictriathlon.com and click through to the corresponding pages. In the next episode, I interview Dr. Jeff Sankoff, who's a physician and triathlon coach, and the topics will revolve around health and medical aspects of triathlon. For example, we will discuss things like heart health, common deficiencies, oral health, diets, and maybe we'll tackle some myths and misconceptions around these health and medical aspects. I haven't conducted the interview yet, but I believe it will be a really relevant and useful episode to listen to for pretty much any endurance athlete. So if you aren't already subscribed to the podcast, please click that subscribe or follow button, whatever they call it in your app, so that you don't miss that episode when it comes out. Finally, big thanks to our sponsors, Precision Fuel Hydration, that you can find on precisionfuelhydration.com. If you're looking for high quality, practical, and tasty fueling and hydration products, make sure to try Precision Fuel Hydration. There are a range of options from drink mix to gels to choose, so you can easily find your personal favorite. And don't forget to take 15% off your first order with the code TTS24. And thank you to Senate. The Senate Swim Trainer is a great tool to have in your toolbox to improve your technique and power, to target specific aspects of your stroke, and to maintain consistency when you don't have time to get to the pool. You can try the Senate risk-free for up to 30 days and get 20% off your first order on senateswimtrainer.com/TTS. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.